Welcome to Apple Insider. Let's compare the 4th generation iPad Air against the new 5th generation iPad Air. Welcome everybody to Apple Insider. It is Andrew here, and you can find me on Twitter at Andrew_OSU. If you haven't done so already, could you please go ahead and subscribe and enable those notifications so you don't miss a single video. Apple has just released the new iPad Air, and with it comes several changes from the previous 4th generation version. So let's go ahead and compare everything different between the iPad Air 4 and the new iPad Air 5, including running some benchmarks on that crazy new M1 processor. One of the first new changes to the iPad Air is the color. And seriously, look at this blue. It has no business being this pretty. This is honestly, in my opinion, the best color that Apple has ever put out. Before, we've seen greens that are a little bit muted, like on the last generation iPad Air, but seriously, this blue color is absolutely stunning. I love it. That slight metallic look to it, it looks so good. It really is a gorgeous looking iPad Air. For what it's worth, the new iPad Air comes in several other colors too, and some have changed and some are gone. Aside from this new blue color, the 5th generation iPad Air comes in Starlight, Space Gray, Pink, Purple, and Blue. Silver is gone, being replaced by Starlight. We also have the green gone, which is what I have here on that last generation model. The pink has now become, or rose gold became pink, and we have an updated version of the blue color. As you can see, Apple didn't really change much in terms of the size, dimensions, anything else between the two iPads. Apple's kept the same dimensions across the board. The only thing really different are those colors that we already talked about. These guys here, they are the same everything except for those colors and those changes to the internals. That even goes for the display. Apple has not changed the display on this iPad either. So it supports everything that it did before, including True Tone, Liquid Retina, the P3 wide color gamut, 500 nits of brightness, and support for the Apple Pencil. If I could just interrupt myself for a quick moment, I've got to thank our sponsor for this video, Baseus. Whether you've got an iPhone that's a couple years old, or maybe you've got one that's brand new, you're likely going to need a solid charger to go with it. And Baseus has you covered with its new Super Sci Pro quick charger. This dual output charger can put up out to 30 watts of power when charging your iPhone. If you use that single USB-C port, you can power it up to 30 watts, which will give you more than 50% charge in only 30 minutes. Additionally, since there are 2 ports, you have a future forward one as well as a legacy USB-A port for any older devices that you may have. If you use the ports in tandem, you'll still get 18 watts of power from the USB-C and an additional 12 watts from that USB-A port. With a maximum of 30 watts of power, it also means you can use MagSafe when you're using that USB-C port too, which is my favorite way to charge my iPhone. Not to mention, these little guys are actually 83% smaller than Apple's own 30-watt charger. These compact chargers are safe and ready to charge all of your gear, whether you've got iPhones, iPads, or Apple Watch. The Baseus Super Sci Pro can help you juice up anywhere you are. If you guys want to grab one of these, we've got links for them down below in the description. Thank you again to Baseus for making this video possible. Now, let's go ahead and get back to our main content. One of my favorite little changes is that Apple upgraded the USB-C port. It now has twice the data rate it had before. It's a USB Type-C 3.1 Gen 2 port, which does data at up to 10 gigabits per second. So any SSDs or other things that you may plug in to the USB port will now run faster than they ever did before. As I mentioned, the new iPad Air is rocking some new silicon. It's using Apple's M1 processor, which is not only the same one used in the high-end iPad Pros, it's also used in several Macs, including the 24-inch iMac that's behind me, the new Mac Mini, MacBook Air, and entry-level MacBook Pro. But what performance improvements does that mean? Apple says we should see a 60% improvement for the CPU performance and twice as good graphics. To put that to the test, I ran a series of benchmarks to test it out. The first benchmark we ran was the Antutu benchmark. You can see here the 4th generation iPad Air on the left and the 5th generation iPad Air here on the right. For the CPU score, we see going from a 211,000 to a 269,000. Big jump for the CPU. Similarly, we have a 304 for the GPU and a 553,000 on the GPU over here. The memory, 102 versus 103, not a huge difference between those two, and UX, 137 versus 140. Again, not too much of a difference. The biggest improvements is going on that CPU and the GPU. Now, let's go ahead and jump over to Geekbench. Here in Geekbench, we can see that we're running the A14 Bionic, which is the 3 gigahertz chip. And over here, we have an ARM chip, which is Apple's M1 chip at 3.2 gigahertz. We're also seeing the move from 3.78 gigs of memory, about 4 gigs of memory, to 8 gigs of RAM memory here on the iPad Air 5. When we go ahead and look at benchmarks, we have our CPU benchmark up first, which shows a 1715 for the single core and a 7229. Going from a 4302 to a 7229, that is a big jump for that multi-core performance. Single core eked up a little bit from a 3 gigahertz chip to a 3.2, so a little bit better single core, but man, that multi-core performance, huge upgrade on this M1 chip in the iPad Air 5. Now let's go ahead and check out the compute benchmark. Okay, and as Apple said, you should get about twice the graphics performance improvement, and dang, if that's not close to what we're seeing here. See, we're getting a 12,480 Metal score on the last generation iPad and a 21,285. Almost double, almost twice that graphics performance going from the iPad Air 4 to the iPad Air 5. These are great benchmarks. Everyone's going to be happy with the freaking power of the new 5th generation iPad Air. Just for fun, this is the Geekbench ML benchmark. We're getting a 900 TensorFlow Lite CPU score here and a 1001 TensorFlow Lite CPU score over here on the new 5th generation. Apple didn't change the physical camera hardware on the new 5th generation iPad Air, but that M1 processor has a new ISP, which means we still get a little bit better photos from the new camera module, and it does enable new Smart HDR. The front-facing camera, on the other hand, got a big upgrade. Apple moved it from 7 megapixels to 12 megapixels. It also has a 122-degree field of view, which enables center stage to keep you in the frame at all time. And you can do time-lapse with video stabilization, has lens correction, and cinematic stabilization when recording videos. For comparison, here's a couple photos that I took of that front-facing camera, including the 7 megapixel sensor and the 12 megapixel sensor. Another difference is support for 5G. Now, this is only the Wi-Fi version of the iPad Air, but you can pick up a cellular version that will now support 5G for the first time. But other than that, that pretty much covers it. Those are the differences, every single difference, between the new 5th generation iPad Air and the 4th generation iPad Air. What do you guys think? Are the changes worth it? Would you pick up a new iPad Air, or would you pick up a discounted iPad Air 4 if you can find it cheaper? Let me know down below in the comments, and if you'd like to pick up a new 5th generation iPad Air or 4th generation iPad Air, we've started to gather the best deals, and I put them down below in the description as well as pinned them in the comments. Otherwise, stay tuned. Got a whole lot more videos on all of Apple's new gear coming your way.